Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and that is Aileen Romulus. This movie is directed by Fede Alvarez, starring Cailee, Spaeny, David Jonsson, Archie, Renaux, and Isabela Merced. And I was extremely excited for this movie because I am a massive fan of the Alien franchise. And yeah, sure, there's been ups and downs. I think that the peak of the franchise was definitely with Alien and Aliens, but honestly, I think there's a lot of merit to a lot of the sequels that we've had since then. Obviously, Alien 3 is extremely divisive amongst fans, but honestly, there's a lot in that movie that makes it a little bit underrated for me, although I think there are several missteps in that film at large. Also, Alien Resurrection, well, that one I can't really defend. That one is kind of a dumpster fire from the very beginning, but it's honestly kind of fun to watch with a group of friends just to kind of laugh and make fun of it in a so bad it's good type of way. And then you have Ridley Scott's prequels, which are filled with so many incredibly interesting and intriguing ideas and themes and, just deeper meanings that add so much lore to the Alien universe that is very much appreciated to me as a fan of those movies as well. But, we've been waiting for the Alien franchise to go back to its roots with a horror film, and that is exactly what Aileen Romulus tries to do. It tries to bridge the gap between Alien and Aliens in a really fun and interesting way, and it's directed by Fede Alvarez, who's a very intense and almost cynical filmmaker when it comes to his horror movies. And so this was a very interesting take in this Alien universe that I very much loved. But what I really loved about this movie is the fact that this movie, yeah, sure, it plays it safe in a lot of ways, and I was kind of expecting this movie to play it safe after, the mixed reception from the previous Alien films. But honestly, the last 15 minutes or so of this movie takes a wild swing that I really appreciate. And so I cannot wait to get into all these spoilers for this movie. So if you have not had a chance to watch Alien Romulus in theaters, go check it out, and let's just jump right into this thing. So first off, I want to talk about how this film is very much a love letter to the Alien franchise at large. Not just for the first two films, because yes, this movie does take place in between Alien and Aliens, but there's a lot of references to Alien 3 and Prometheus and Covenant and even Alien Resurrection. Yes, even that dumpster fire that I just mentioned a second ago. This movie has a loving, almost tribute to that movie in a very weird and strange way. And so yes, this movie does kind of feel like Alien soup, and I've heard some people complain about that this movie has nothing original about it, or that it feels very derivative of all these other things. But honestly, I think with a very talented director like Fede Alvarez at the helm of this film, who adds an intensity that only he can bring to a film like this, I think it worked by the ending. So let's just go down the list and see how this film pays tribute to every single Alien film that has come in the past, including the 1979 original Ridley Scott film. And this movie opens up immediately with the fact that there is a ship going out to explore the wreckage of the Nostromo to try to find any sort of remnants of, the creature that was killed at the ending of that film, or at least we thought was killed at the ending of that film. And we know that this alien creature is very resilient. It's not going to be easily killed with lack of oxygen, lack of food. And I guess in my head, I see that this alien creature formed, this like crystallized exoskeleton around it to keep it alive in space, and that's why they find it in some sort of meteorite that they pull into their ship, and they cut it open, and now they have access to the creature that the company has been trying to get access to for hundreds of years, ever since Weyland wanted to find some sort of cure for himself in Prometheus. And so when our main characters in this film discover the ship floating above their colony planet, they decide to go into it to try to steal their cryo sleep pods so they can escape this planet and go to a new place. Well, exactly what happened to the ship, because they went around, they got this alien, they did experiments on it, and of course things went wrong and killed everybody on board of this ship. And so that's really the main reference this movie makes to that original 1979 film, along with having Ian Holm reprise his role as, not Ash this time around, but as another android, Rook, in this film, which I think a lot of people have been, mostly negatively referencing this character in this film and his presence here at all, because yes, Ian Holm passed away back in 2020, and now you're, doing that, Tarkin Rogue One type situation with this character in this film. And I tend to agree with the complaints here. I don't think the CG looks particularly great with this character, but I guess in world with the story, it does make sense. Obviously, we have a large history of the Alien films having different synthetic characters that are played by the same actor. Obviously, you had David and Walter in Prometheus and Alien Covenant, and how it's the same actor playing these two different models of the same synthetic android. And you had obviously the character Bishop from Aliens reprise his role in Alien 3, and so you've had a long history of these Alien films using the same actor to play different models of different variants of synthetics in this world. And so it makes sense that they'd bring Ian Holm back in this world. I just don't think the CGI looked particularly that great in this movie, and it was just right smack dab in the middle of that uncanny valley that just made you have this disconnect every time they cut back to this character. And I think the bigger problem is the fact that this character plays a pretty massive role in this film, and even if it just had that original scene where they go up to that synthetic synthetic and they take the little chip from it, and you see that it is the Ian Holm model, and you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. But then you have the Andy character play that sort of evil synthetic like he does in this film, without the constant, man on his shoulder kind of telling him what to do with the whole Ash thing. I think you could have done without it very easily. I didn't need the line where he said that, I can't tell you about your chances, but you do have my sympathies. It felt like a very on-the-nose reference to that original Alien film. But again, I think you can also brush it off as a thing where, if you program the synthetic and you have like this, generic type of company speak where you say, oh, this android was created by the company to say these things, to, put these humans at ease in a very disconnected and very corporate manner. That line could be kind of brushed off to be that sort of explanation. But again, I do think that some of this role just felt a little bit unnecessary. But I do think that the majority of things that this movie takes from the original Alien film does work at large. Like I said, the tone and atmosphere it takes from Alien and that horror vibe that movie set up perfectly blended into this film's first act before you got into the second act, which, got into Aliens territory with the more action-oriented type of this film. And you even have a scene where you have characters stuck in a room full of facehuggers that is very reminiscent of the scene from Aliens, but again, it has that intensity and that visceral quality that's, Fede Alvarez is going to bring to his films. And so, but yeah, sure, you're getting into the action-oriented side of Aliens now into this film, but again, in this placement of the timeline, it makes sense to kind of bridge the gap between the horror elements of Alien to the action elements of Aliens in a film that takes place in between those two films. I thought it worked really well. You even get a visual reference to Alien 3 in the iconic shot of that film with, Ripley going face-to-face with a Xenomorph in that film, and you have, Cailee Spaeny's character Rain in this film going face-to-face with a Xenomorph in a very similar shot in this film. I love that this movie is paying tribute to, David Fincher's first film, which I know he disowns that film, but again, I think that movie has a lot of merit to it if you kind of strip away the elements that people dislike about that movie and just look at it as a standalone film as itself. It does work pretty well, especially when you watch the assembly cut of that movie. I think that a lot of that film does work, so I'm glad that this movie paid tribute to that one as well, along with Alien Resurrection with the entire third act of this film, which I thought was just crazy. But before we get into that, I do want to talk about how the movie first references Prometheus and Covenant. And honestly, I was really hoping that this film would have some reference and some sort of tie-in to Prometheus and Covenant because that trilogy was never able to be wrapped up in those films. And I'm really glad that the movie went in that direction to have these scientists reverse engineer, this alien creature to, I guess, clone other facehuggers and to clone all these different elements and to drive the black goo back from those creatures and to create some sort of serum. I believe it's called like a compound Z or something like that in this film, and to have that be a source to try to create a new cure that Weyland was looking for all those years ago. I love the fact that they tied into that with these nice little nods and musical nods as well in this film, which, as a big fan of Prometheus specifically and also of Alien Covenant, I'm really glad that we touched on those ideas and had some visual references and had, an idea of that to transfer through into this film. And when you have this compound and you inject it into one of our characters, what are you going to get out of that? Well, you're going to get a hybrid creature that was, also in Alien Resurrection, which the idea of a hybrid in the Alien franchise has been around for a very long time, and it never worked out for this franchise. Obviously, if you've seen Alien Resurrection, you know how wild and insane that movie is and how ridiculously funny it is. I think the design of the hybrid in that movie is questionable from the very start. It does not look great whatsoever, but it's really fun to laugh at. And I think the way the hybrid in that film dies at the end of the film is completely brutal, and I really do love how it all happened at the ending of that film. But the idea of a hybrid was immediately shunned after that film from the Alien fans at large. And when I believe Neil Blomkamp was going to do his Alien film, it was very much rumored that he was going to get into the idea of some sort of hybrid between human and Xenomorph and how what that would look, and these different creature designs that he created for that possible film. And I really wonder if this movie took from that original script that Neil Blomkamp had, because I don't know, it's just something that this franchise has been wanting to do for so long, and it never panned out for them. And I think this is going to be a point in this movie where it's either going to make or break this film for a lot of people, because yeah, sure, you have the first two acts of this movie, and even getting into the third act being a fairly standard Alien movie of these characters trying to survive against these facehuggers and these Xenomorphs. And then, every single Alien film from the very beginning started off with a trend where you think that it's all over, you think that the characters are safe before you get a fourth act type of thing where the Xenomorph was hiding inside of their ship their entire time, and they have to go against it in one last battle where the synthetic character usually gets ripped in half or something like that in this last section of the movie. That is very much a trope that these Alien movies have been doing since the very beginning, and so to see it here, but instead of the Xenomorph hiding on their ship, it is the pregnant character giving birth to this hybrid offspring character. And the look and design of this thing, I thought, really did work because, again, I think that this movie benefits from the fact that Ridley Scott expanded the lore with Prometheus and Covenant, because this creature kind of looks like a blend between a human, an engineer, and a xenomorph. And I love that blend of these three things. It looked extremely disturbing and terrifying, and kind of got into the same territory that H.R. Geiger got into with his original designs, that just look very uncanny and very uncomfortable and very suggestive and just really disturbing and creepy from the very beginning, just looking at this thing and how nightmarish it looked. I think it really did work. And I put it in my Letterboxd review. I think some people are going to absolutely hate this movie because of how wild it gets in this third act of the film, but I honestly can't help but appreciate that Fede Alvarez went in that direction and he did something truly out there and bizarre at the ending of this film. And I think, at least for me as an honest member, it really did pay off. But I do think that this movie was nothing but these references to these previous Alien films. I think that it would have, fallen flat for a lot of audience members. I've even heard some people say that it did fall flat because they do feel like it felt derivative for the large majority of this movie. But the thing that kept me really interested in this film are the characters in this film, because I think that Cailee Spaeny in particular as Rain and David Jonsson as the synthetic character Andy in this film are fantastic characters, some of my favorite characters in this franchise in general, and a really great, new duo that we can have in this franchise that I hope they bring back for a potential sequel to this film. The ensemble of characters that we get in this film all live on this, Weyland-Yutani mining colony planet, where they're all essentially forced to work a certain amount of hours to be able to, satisfy their quota by the company, to be able to get a fly permit to be able to escape from this planet. But because it is the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, they're going to set a mandate of all these hours, and as soon as our main character gets the hours that she needs to be able to get her fly permit, they're going to up those hours because, the quota has now magically changed, and now you have to live here for another 6 years until you grow old and die from lung cancer like her parents did. And so this is a really terrible situation for this character to be in, so you're immediately endeared to her struggles, because everybody's worked for some shitty corporation in their lives to be, stuck in a situation that they do not want to be stuck in, and it just seems like the world keeps on, pushing them down further into the dirt with absolutely no way of escape. And so our characters here are very desperate to be able to escape this planet, to be able to see the sun for this first time, because this planet is covered in clouds and smog and dirt and grime, and it's just really a shitty place to live, where they haven't ever even seen the sun and they're dreaming about a sunrise and a sunset. And honestly, this setup is very reminiscent of Fede Alvarez's other film Don't Breathe, with how you have this band of characters that are desperate to escape the situation that they are in by, pulling off a heist of sorts to get the materials that they need or the money that they need to be able to escape, but they're stopped by this unstoppable force that's going to prevent them from achieving their goals and kill them off one at a time. It has a very similar vibe to Don't Breathe, and even the cynical nature of the kills in this movie are very similar to that of the Evil Dead remake. And I think honestly the brutality of the kills in this movie work a little bit better in this franchise than it does for Evil Dead, because I think that Sam Raimi's original trilogy has a lot of camp to it, and I just feel like his Evil Dead remake, as great as it is, just kind of loses the fun aspect of that movie and feels a little bit too cynical. But I think that cynicism feels a little bit more at home with this film, because they're going to have a whole bunch of other characters besides our main two here that are going to be killed off in gleefully gory ways in this film. That's just they're here definitely as to, I guess, up the body count, but even these characters have some merit to them as well. You have the brother-sister duo of Tyler and Kay in this movie. Tyler is an ex-love interest of our main character, Rain. You can see that they have some history between them that is kind of hinted at through the majority of this film, and Kay is a very good friend of Rain's, and she, she's pregnant in this film, and I guess it's kind of hinted at that maybe the father of her baby is the other guy in this movie, I think his name is BJORN. I don't know, because he's also in a relationship with the other character in this film, NAVARRO, and so I don't really know. Maybe that's just me making things up, but you never really know when it comes to situations like this in this small friend group. But Kay is a character that is pregnant in this film, so you're immediately endeared to her because you kind of think that she's going to be safe because she is a pregnant woman in this film, and that'd be really brutal if this movie decided to kill this character in a very gruesome and brutal and disgusting way. But obviously you need to have somebody give birth to the offspring in this movie, and so well, there goes Isabela Merced's character. But even the BJORN character has a lot more of an integral role in this film than I initially thought on first watch, because, this character is the bully of the group. He's the jerk of the group, which every single movie like this needs to have a character that's going to poke the hornet's nest. And, this character is really interesting to me because, yes, he's there mainly to add to the body count of this film, to, poke the hornet's nest and to bully Andy's character because he is a synthetic. But he has a really interesting line in this movie where he talks about how his mom was killed, in a situation where a synthetic had to choose between, the the trolley problem. It chooses between saving 10 people or 3 people that this, synthetic character is closer to. And obviously, the synthetic character chose to save the large majority of the people because that is more logical to the standpoint of something that is created, that something is programmed by the company. And so you have the Andy character, who is basically on the opposite end of the spectrum, where he was programmed by Rain's father to have one primary directive. And that primary directive is to do things in the best interest of Rain, to protect Rain, to, comfort her throughout all the hardships that she may have in her life after her parents passed away. And so when you need to up this character's credentials and able to get them out of the situation they are in when they're stuck in the room full of the facehuggers, they input this one chip into the character and he becomes very different. His, problems moving around and the glitches that he had go away. He becomes much more intelligent, and he becomes much more of that synthetic type character that you are afraid of in these alien films that are, very much programmed to be doing things for the company's sake and nobody else's sake. Now you're dealing with a character that is kind of betraying our group, betraying Rain, and saying that, oh, the NAVARRO character, once she got the facehugger stuck on her and has the alien inside of her, he's immediately like, no, we need to abandon her, we need to leave her behind. Or when he's shutting the door and the characters are running and trying to get into safety, he pushes the button so early that it almost traps another character outside of it and almost leaves somebody behind. There's also a really great jab that this character has towards Rain's character, where he's saying, oh yeah, what would make somebody want to leave somebody behind, even though their entire goal in this film is to go to this one planet that is outside of the Weyland-Yutani, I guess, grasp on this universe. And his character, this synthetic character, wouldn't be allowed to live there. And so yeah, she was even planning to leave him behind. And so there's a lot of great dynamics that this little jab that the BJORN character has towards this character from the very beginning that kind of sets up this character's arc of going from the comforting person for Rain to the antagonist of this film for a little while before he finally gives in and lets Rain take the chip out of him. And a very emotional scene between these two characters. I thought that was a great moment to show this character's arc and to show the terrifying side of the synthetics in this universe and also the more comforting side of the synthetics. In terms of caring about other characters in this film, NAVARRO, I didn't really care too much about her. She was just the one that we knew from the trailer was going to die from the chestburster scene, which was absolutely brutal, by the way. I love how that entire sequence is shot and cut together with, the ship kind of going and flying off to the side and how intense that entire sequence was. Like I said, BJORN was there just to die in a very brutal way, but his death was also very brutal and also added some more lore to the world of Alien, because in that original film, when the chestburster scene happens, the little alien kind of scurries off, and the next time you see it, it's already the giant Xenomorph that we know and fear from that film. In this movie, you get to see that middle process where it cocoons itself into this really disgusting looking thing, and you have the BJORN character go up to it and try to shock it with his taser, and obviously things go bad and his tail whips out and the acid blood drips on him and he dies from all of that. That scene was also very brutal and also adds a lot more lore to see that process of it being birthed from this cocoon that it created for itself. A lot of great and brutal stuff here. The Tyler character, I guess you really only care about Tyler because of his relationship with Rain, and because Rain cares about him so much, then through her you decide to care about him for a decent amount of this movie. He does die in a very brutal way also, with the Xenomorph sneaking up behind him and just stabbing him with his tail, and then lifting him up and then having the face, like the little mouth thing inside of the Xenomorph's mouth, kind of slam into his face. All that stuff was really bloody and gory and great. But when it comes to that trademarked, Fede Alvarez gore and just brutality that he treats his characters with, especially in the Evil Dead movies, you just gotta feel bad for Isabela Merced's character in this film, because she is treated horribly throughout the majority of this movie, because you find out at the beginning that she is pregnant and you think that she's going to be safe, but of course she's not going to be safe. She's going to watch the NAVARRO character have the chestburster scene happen right in front of her eyes, and she's been on the ship the entire time, so she very much has no idea what in the world is going on. To see her reaction of this scene just through her eyes it just added a lot more intensity to that scene. But then even after that, she's stuck in the room, and Andy, having this new chip in him, won't open the door because the Xenomorph is behind her, and the Xenomorph is waiting for them to open the door, and it's going to endanger the rest of the group. And so she's stuck in this room and she gets stabbed from behind and pulled away, and you think that maybe she died in that scene, but no, she's not going to be dead yet. She's going to be stuck on the wall, and the characters are going to have to cut her down and try to get her to the ship and get her into the elevator. And after everybody is dead, and it's basically just Rain and her going up this elevator shaft, and Rain decides to go back for Andy because obviously she can't leave him behind in the way that she was originally planning on doing. She leaves her on her own, and of course, this character being in as much pain as she's in, she's going to take that vial that's Compound Z that was created in this lab by all these scientists in this movie. She's going to take that compound, and of course, it's going to birth the offspring in this movie in a really disgusting and just gross and brutal way. And then no, she's not dead even after that. She's still alive. And so how does Fede Alvarez decide to kill this character? Well, he's going to have this offspring character character, which again looks absolutely terrifying in this film, go up and just essentially breastfeed on her, which is really disgusting. All that stuff was really gross, and she gets killed kind of off screen by this character just kind of feeding off of her. It's really brutal. I think they treated this character so incredibly just cruel in this film, which, God, like, poor Isabela Merced. I honestly am a big fan of her, and I cannot wait to see her in The Last of Us Part 2 as Dina. I'm really excited for that, and obviously she's going to be in the Superman movie as Hawkgirl, so she has a great career ahead of her. Just this film, man, she really went through it. But really what makes this film work even more so than all those, fun references that it has to all these other films is the characters at large here. Because yeah, sure, a good majority of them are here just to die, but those deaths are very brutal and entertaining to watch, and the main duo of Andy and Rain is really entertaining to watch throughout the majority of this film. And Rain is a badass in this film. I love Cailee, Spaeny, and her using the gun to shoot out all these Xenomorphs in the zero gravity sequence, which, talking about my favorite sequence of the entire movie, there's a couple sequences that I really loved. There's of course the scene where they had to be quiet. They raised the temperature in the room to be able to kind of sneak through the room filled with all the facehuggers. Really intense sequence. I love that sequence there. Also the entire zero gravity sequence, when they set up the idea of the purge system with the zero gravity going on and off at the beginning of the movie. I knew it was going to come into play by the end of it, and the fact that they were kind of floating through all the, I guess, the floating acid blood from shooting all the Xenomorphs. That was a really, really intense sequence. I really did love the visceral, direction that this director had when it came to these sequences in this movie. Honestly, all that stuff was great. The elevator sequence is great. The callback to Alien 3 with that one shot was really intense and great. And even, Andy, jumping down onto the Xenomorph and, shooting it to death and saying, "Get away from her, you bitch," at the end of this movie. It got a, massive cheer by the audience from this film. And when it comes to my negatives for this movie, honestly, I don't really have a lot. Honestly, I think this movie has a lot of plot conveniences that I think some people can point at. I think the biggest one, at least for me, was when the chestburster scene was happening, and it's all in this ship, and it's kind of floating next to, the main Romulus station, and, NAVARRO's foot kind of hits the gear, and the ship starts flying to the left, and eventually keeps on, wrapping around the ship and goes back into the ship inside of this one chamber. That's extremely convenient for it to just not have just floated off into space and into the rings that was, surrounding the planet that they were, trying to escape from. Honestly, I think it's extremely convenient that it landed right back there. Also, the elevator shaft leading back directly to their ship was also a little bit of a convenience, but honestly, I don't mind those sort of things because I think that the visceral action and the intensity in these horror sequences were good enough for me to really not care too much about that. In terms of other negatives, again, I do think the Ian Holm thing is very uncanny, and again, a little nitpicky stuff like that is throughout this movie, but quite frankly, I really love the ride that this movie brought me on. It really did feel very energetic and very entertaining, and again, that last act was such a wild swing from this movie that I couldn't help but appreciate how crazy it was, and I left this movie being really surprised by this Alien movie. Yes, it is a lot of things that you expect it to be, but I think it does go a step further with the characters and with that third act that make this movie a little more special than some of the Alien movies in the past. And so honestly, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on Alien Romulus. Were you on board with the last act of this movie, or did it kind of lose you? Honestly, I feel like this movie could easily lose the audience because of how wild that third act is, especially if you are a Alien purist and you don't want, or you don't like the idea of any sort of human Xenomorph hybrid. Did it work for you? Did not work for you? Comment down in the comment section down below what your thoughts are of the ending of this movie, along with the movie at large. What did you guys think of Alien Romulus? And of course, if you did enjoy this review, make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this one. I've had a lot of great horror movies in most recent memory. Of course, we had Cuckoo last week, and then we had, Oddity, which is very, interesting, strange horror movie. We also had, Long Legs and Trap and a whole bunch of other things on the channel here. So if you want to see more reviews just like this one, you can go check out those videos as well. But like I said, comment down below, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy this review, and I hope to see you all in my next one.